right. We welcome the public to the Waunakee Community School District Co-Curricular Committee. Co-curricular activities are voluntary, school-sponsored programs which largely occur outside the instructional day. Co-curricular activities are purposeful and complement academic programming occurring beyond the traditional classroom. The Waunakee Community School District is committed to providing our students the opportunity to fully participate in curricular, extracurricular, student services, recreational, or other programs or activities without impairment related to student sex, race, religion, national origin, ancestry, color, creed, marital or parental status, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability or handicap. It's my pleasure to call this co-curricular committee to order. In attendance are Randy Gutenberg, Superintendent of Waunakee School District, Brian Borowski, High School Principal, Aaron May, Athletic Director, and three of the Board of Education Co-Curricular Committee members, David Bocher, Julie Ingebretson, and Brian Hafer, myself. So with the agenda, can we get a motion to approve the current agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all opposed? Or all in favor? Aye. Okay. So for public comments, we do have one comment from Coach David Kettner. Sent an email today to Randy Gutenberg advocating for the commencement of co-curricular activities in the fall and encourage us to promote creativity in seeking the ideas and solutions as we go through our planning for all sports, not just boys soccer, but for all sports. So that will also be put in the minutes. Anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. So at this time, I'm just going to direct it over to Randy to be able to run the meeting with Aaron.
Awesome, thank you, Brian. What you'll see in your packet, members of the committee, is a memo that Aaron put together. In our agenda, you can see that this is obviously related to co-curricular programs and related issues per COVID-19 and reopening of school. I think all of these things coincide together, and as we start to enter into August, that is usually the place and time where we have our school year starts to kick off, particularly with all of our student activities at the secondary level. So the meeting of this committee is timely in respect to really, I think, updating the board as far as where we're at and what are some of the rules that we have to be considering, some of the decision points that we have for the future, and really kind of an analysis of what the requirements are per public health Madison-Dane County, and how do those really articulate through to all of our programs. Aaron has put together, as I said, a memo that touches on a lot of these. So I think the first place that we'd like to begin is, and Aaron, if I can just have you talk at a high level a little bit about kind of how public health, Madison-Dane County, they put out kind of guidelines for sports, and then also WIAA, and kind of just talk a little bit of how those two organizations kind of impact us and kind of how they approach the issues that we have at hand.
Yeah. So we'll go back a little bit. The WIA since May of this year has stated that it's going to be local decision, local control regarding sports in the fall. And that has been their position since that time. WIA sets up, is our organizing body. It sets up practice, start dates, playoff situations. It regulates game management situations. It regulates the actual games themselves in terms of the rules in which we play by. It also regulates eligibility for students. And Dane County Public Health, with their order, has, with their most recent Forward Dane order in this phase 2, has set up sports guidance rules, which basically come to this. Outside events, you can have 25 people in a group, no more than 100 in an event. Inside events, you can have 10 people in a group, no more than 25 people at the entire organization. So the WIA has said, we'll let you do whatever you have to do within the rules of your local public health office. So for Waunakee, that means Dane County Public Health. And to use their example, that if we were to have a volleyball right now, 10 people in a group means we can have 10 on a court, but in the entire practice, we can't have more than 25 people. So if you know a little bit about volleyball, there's 6 on each side of the court. So we can't even have enough to be able to scrimmage ourselves fully. Right now in phase 2. And we can only have 25 people in the gym at one time. So it definitely puts a strain on what we, in terms of when we practice, how we practice, and what that scheduling looks like. Because we're gonna have to spread things out, move things around in terms of how these things get practiced. The WIA recently has been presented with a plan from a group of superintendents from the southwest part of the state. It's a proposal to move fall sports to the spring and have a modified season during the spring, and then move spring sports to the summer and have a modified season for those spring sports. The WIA Board of Control, which is made up of 10 members from around the state, 1 representative from each district, and then 3 at-large members. The Board of Control will be the one voting on that. They just sent out a press release today that they are going to have a meeting on Thursday to discuss that proposal. I don't believe at this time that they'll be taking any vote on it. I also haven't gotten any indication with my conversations with people at the WIA that, I guess, I don't want to come back to that, but I am not real confident that they're going to end up approving that plan. Even though it's creative and it ensures 3 seasons, the reason I'm not confident is the WIA represents the entire state. And just as much pressure as we're feeling to want to make changes to ensure we can play 3 seasons, those other parts of the states that don't have the same type of rules we do are applying the same amount of pressure to keep things as is at WIA. So I would say, based on some conversations I've had with other athletic directors in the state and people at the WIA, I have a feeling it'll become, I don't want to say deadlocked or gridlocked, but I just don't think there's going to be enough of a consensus one way or another to move them to make any kind of change. Maybe they come out and say we're going to delay the start of fall sports, but again, I don't feel confident saying that that's a likely outcome. If you were to ask me right now what I think the most likely outcome from the WIA is, things stay as is, and you'll be able to participate based on what is allowed by your public health department. So the memo, it got pretty long, got pretty large, as I was trying to cover as many different things as I could. It's written as if we were right now today trying to do all of these sports in phase 2. Now, because I can't predict when, and Randy and I talked about this, when, if, and what phase 3 might look like. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what co-curriculars would look like right now. And some co-curriculars have already made decisions. If you look in there, One Act, the organizing body for the One Act competition has already made their decision about doing a virtual competition. Same with our equestrian team. The Horse Association has already made their decision regarding their events and canceling those events. So some of these decisions have been made, but there's some other things that I think we just have to kind of realize that athletics this fall, activities this fall, it's going to be a whole paradigm shift of what it looks like. I mean, along with as much as education is going to shift one way or another, our activities are going to have to shift just that much too. And
maybe I missed it. Did you say that just, the proposal would be to shift fall sports to spring? Would there be did you say that there may be some spring sports like boys golf that could be played in the fall to be able to get more kids out?
That is not part of the proposal. The proposed plan basically takes the fall sports, moves them all to spring, and slides spring back to what I'll call the summer months, the end of May, June, and July.
So it cancels all the fall and it just
Shoves everything down.
shoves them back. Aaron, can you talk a little bit about just how Madison-Dane County Public Health has defined kind of high, medium, and low risk, what that means for us? So kind of a high-level overview of all of our sports. I think it gives you a picture of what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Yeah. So Dane County has basically, it's taken just about every sport you can imagine, from canoeing, equestrian team, to the more, I'll call them traditional high school sports, and basketball, soccer, football, those types of sports, and has assigned them to a risk category. And that risk category is based off the nature of the sport, the amount of contact in that sport, and the number of participants in that sport. So you might have a contact sport like basketball, but it's not in the same, it's not as hot, as risky as another sport like maybe football, which has more kids competing on the field at one time. So your high-risk sports, you're looking at football. In the fall, the high-risk sport is football and cheerleading, with their tumbling activities. You're also looking at wrestling, hockey, lacrosse, some of those other sports. Those winter sports aren't in the memo, it's only the fall sports that I covered in there. The moderate risk sports, you're looking at volleyball, soccer, and some of those team sports that are not, basketball would be in there as a moderate risk, where contact might happen, but it's not the objective of the game. Football, wrestling, hockey, contact is an objective of those sports, and that's why they're considered higher risk. Some other things that are interesting, low-risk sports would include things like cross-country, golf, and singles tennis and singles swim. They categorize the relays and doubles tennis as moderate-risk sports. Cross-country, if you've ever been to a cross-country race, though, they do not run 6 feet apart, so that part is, I was kind of surprised when they categorized that as a low risk. Under public health, low-risk sports can practice and compete as long as they maintain 6 feet of social distancing during that time. So we could potentially golf, which I think is pretty practical because it's a sport where it's very easy to maintain your 6 feet of distance. Cross-country is technically categorized as a low-risk sport. I do have some reservations about competing in cross-country because it's not practical. If I'm running a race and I'm coming up, I'm not gonna, at 6 feet, and then go 6 feet out, and then wait till I'm 6 feet in front of you to come back in front of you in a race. That just doesn't happen in a cross-country meet. I think it would be difficult to maintain that.
How many schools actually have staggered start technology?
That's a good question. We do not, and the reason we don't is because the Badger Conference doesn't have, they have their conference meet, and that's the only cross-country meet they have, so that rotates. So when it's our turn, we just contract with PT timing or in focus timing to do all of our timing. But our cross-country coach, Heather Raffel, and the other Badger Conference schools have discussed what might it look like if and when we can run. You know, we can run, and we've got to maintain our 6 feet social distancing, so we stagger our start, and we've got to stay under the gathering size limit. So only, you know, instead of previous years where the varsity runners would all go, and then everybody else would run in the JV meet. That's just not going to be, not under those current public health rules. It's probably going to be the 5 varsity and 5 JV runners. And we might have to rotate who those kids are depending on the races to get those kids some experience.
Do you think the WIA is concerned about championships and playoffs and stuff if some teams are playing 4 or running in 4 meets and others are running in 12, and how that?
Their public stance, they've said, is we will offer playoffs and a tournament series for those schools that are able to participate.
Okay.
If that means half the schools, that means half the schools. I have not vetted the information, but according to the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association, currently there's only 5 counties where football games can actually take place at this point in time. Now, in a month or 6 weeks, that might be different, but as it stands in July, there's only 5 counties right now where it can really happen.
So one of the issues that we have in front of us then is there's the minimal sports that are able to really participate in our county without general restrictions other than the 6 feet distancing.
Yeah, and that's golf and cross country.
And singles tennis.
Singles tennis,
And
yeah.
singles swimming.
Yeah.
So that's all you have. The rest of them can still practice. They just have to maintain the social distancing and create their sport or their workout or their time together in a way that's in compliant with the regulations.
Yeah. So you're looking at different, mostly drill and skill type activities. You're probably not doing short-sided games in soccer. You're not doing what's called skelly in football, where you're running plays and things like that.
And we have to maintain the group sizes,
Yeah.
which means if you look at some of our teams that are large, you're going to have to break those into smaller pods and then separate them so that they're actually operating as separate units. So some
And
of
so
our
how can you
teams,
split up one football field? Is that considered one space, or could you do 50 and 50?
So,
I did it 50 and 50. I had permission from public health to do 50 and 50 for like the weight training agility things that started this week. They have a number of kids on one side, 25 and 25 on the other. They don't mix, and they can operate separately as 2 groups of 25.
yeah, it's the not mixing part that's key.
Not mixing.
How are you handling the locker rooms for
The
We
locker
don't
rooms
allow
would be
them to
closed.
that? Everything's closed.
Yeah,
So the kids would basically, it'd be like youth sports. The kids would have to bring their equipment home, their gear home.
Yeah, they bring their own water bottle, their own towel, their own things, and that's how we've dealt with that. So the piece that I think then comes up to our next series of questions is 2 things. So there's certain pieces of these activities that can get started, they just can't compete within our county. Even so, let's just choose like soccer. But there's going to be, or volleyball, those are 2 good examples. But there's events that we have scheduled right now. I think volleyball was a good example. We have like one of the early events they have is like a 24-game scrimmage that
We host that. We have a 2014 scrimmage that we've hosted. We've been hosting. I talked to Ann. It's been 15 years now, and so we have a lot of teams kind of counting on us to host. And I've already gotten messages from them asking if we're still going to host. But on the flip, so we've got that. We've got also a soccer tournament and a girls golf invite, all in August or right at the beginning of September. That we're scheduled at. Right now, we're scheduled to be hosting. Per rules, we could still have girls golf per the public health rules. But right now, as written, we couldn't have the volleyball or the soccer tournaments.
So those are pieces as I think as that Aaron's going to have to make decisions on as we move forward, that those just can't be done and those can't be hosted. Because under the current rules, those aren't allowed. The flip side of hosting items is then, for example, let's just pick, you can choose any of the sports, so let's pick on soccer. If soccer was not able to be played here, but was able to be played in Beaver Dam, or Portage, or Baraboo, or Reedsburg, what's our position on travel? And I think that the piece that we've talked about was it certainly has the allowability to play in another county, but we're also then transporting our kids from here to another community, and then you start to risk those connections that also play into potential spread of illness that could then impact what's happening in Waunakee and into our instructional pieces. So those are kind of but those are key questions, and I believe that's what Coach Kettner's question was realizing it's not
able to participate and compete here, but can we travel to compete somewhere else? So the two decision points we have to look at is obviously we're going to have to cancel some events from a hosting standpoint because they're just not allowed by public health. But we also have to have a stance. I'm at a point here as far as, are we going to allow any of our teams to travel to another county that has more open guidelines that would allow for those competitions?
Will those open counties welcome us?
Yeah, I think Randy can also attest to this. My conversations with the Badger Conference. So the Badger Conference is 16 teams, schools, 7 of which are in Dane County. The other 9 are outside of Dane County. And the general opinion that I get from those athletic directors is they're planning on playing things as scheduled. So they're going to be, they're right now planning, if today was the day for soccer to be at Sauk Prairie, that we would play them at Sauk Prairie. Or whoever it is, if it's Sauk Prairie and Bearwood. They're planning on playing that schedule as scheduled. So that's why it's kind of a decision point for us. What are we going to make? I want us hopefully to come from a position of where we're trying to get kids games, get kids playing and doing things. But we do have some considerations about what's the exposure of having them go to other places.
Well, I know we've talked about, and we'll talk about it Monday, trying to solidify an opening plan for what we're to come up with.
Yeah.
If it's a virtual plan, I don't see any activities happening. If we're not putting kids in the classrooms, we're probably not putting them on the fields. But that's something to discuss. If it's virtual or hybrid, or if we're face-to-face, now we have to worry about kids bringing back stuff from other counties and other teams. So, and if it's not held the same way, if it's a free-for-all like normal, and you can use the locker rooms, no problem, and all that kind of stuff, I fear that, then we have an outbreak and then we have to really shut down things here. So.
I would say the one thing, and I don't know if this is an argument for or against going somewhere else to compete, but just the age group of my boys, they know a lot of kids that are in a lot of traveling teams. We as a family decided not to do any of those traveling events. So currently our kids, community kids, our district kids, are traveling, are going to Waunakee to play games, we had baseball kids down in Georgia, basketball players in Indiana, so it's, I don't know if that's an argument for us to travel or not, but I think we've had parents and the community kind of already, at least in looking at it, make their own decision about what they think is appropriate for their kids.
Right.
And now I think as a district, we would have to decide where do we fit, because now if we're going to say travel there, that's now as a district we're endorsing that. And that would be the decision point.
The other piece that we've discussed, and again, it's at a high level conceptually, is if we don't allow the travel, we adhere to kind of our guidelines here in Dane County, and those guidelines stay static as far as what they are. And it gets to that we have in-person school, so we keep these programs going. There is merit to trying to keep the activities and the connections between coaches and kids. So if you had a soccer team that can't do a full-out game here, and we're not going to allow them to travel, for example, we find merit in being able to keep those kids involved with their coaches and as a team for the support, all the pieces that we benefit, we value out of activities, trying to maintain that as much as possible. I had a parent contact me today just with regards to our weight program and our fitness program that we're doing on Warrior Stadium. It's not inside, it's not in the locker room, it's not in the weight room, it's on the stadium field, socially distanced, and the positive impact that just in the last 2 days that's had on our kids as far as just how they've looked at things.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, and if for some reason we don't have fall sports, and I know Randy and I have talked about this, I mean, we have students who could be scholarship athletes somewhere. And so you know, and I would say if for some reason we would cancel fall sports or if WIA would do something, that there must be some petition to WIA to allow coaches to work with individuals, quarterbacks and receivers, or certain goalies in soccer to be able to keep their skill development going for them to be able to learn and grow and get ready for college. I'm all for that. That whether it be band or choir or whatever it may be, it just depends on the model that we, I guess, choose.
I think you focus on the model first, and then from there you make decisions on how it impacts some of these.
Right.
But those are some of the issues that we have out there with regards to the traveling, hosting, and then if we're limiting but still want to have participation, trying to see how we keep kids active.
I think, I'd like to say, I think our main goal, and the biggest thing we've been hearing from the community, is they want the kids back in school, if possible, as safely as possible. The main purpose of the school district is education. Anything we do, we're at a brink now as to whether we can hold in-person classes or not. Anything that puts that at risk, I think, is a bad idea. We have to prioritize that part. And if we're being told by the medical experts that this is how you should do your sports, sending our kids across a county line because a different county is letting them do something else is a bad idea. We're putting at risk the whole functioning of the rest of the school district in order for some kids to go play a soccer game. And while that soccer game would normally be great, or a football game or whatever, it's not worth risking the whole school district having to shut down because something happens. And if we're gonna say that safety and health is this way on our fields, we shouldn't be on another field that runs it differently and risking losing the whole school district over it. That's my personal opinion. I know there's people who are gonna have a different one, and it's gonna be hard making any decision in this. I also think there's gonna be the ability that you're gonna be able to pick some things that you can do. Whether it's, I saw the thing on Waunakee going virtual. I assume forensics will be able to do something similar. Single person, the golf and tennis, yeah, they're gonna be able to go. But unfortunately, a lot of the rest probably can't. I think it's gonna be important for us to let the community know which ones are and aren't very, very directly. I hope at some point we will literally just go through each one and make the decision and say that's it, and we put that out as publicly as possible, exactly what the rules are for each sport, with the understanding that, again, medical conditions change, that's gonna change.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I don't want, we're here for an education first, and don't get me wrong, I did my dissertation on sports and how it relates to academic success. I understand the importance on it. But there are a lot more kids in school than, probably are in a sporting event or something like that. But everyone participates in those in some way. But I would feel horrible if we allowed that to happen and we had to shut down a school or partial schools and send kids home without getting an education. But I agree. I think once we get to that point, we need to go through and, set it up. But I would hope that the state would allow us, if we do have to cancel some seasons, to be able to have our coaches work small groups when we can for skill development and practice outside the season. For those seniors who aren't going to get a shot to play a game, that gives them at least to put on a helmet and go out and do some skills and get ready for college.
So these sports, you don't already have teams set up yet, right?
No, you mean like who's on varsity, who's on JV? No, not really, no.
So kids that haven't been involved in sports may want to be involved in skill development, but not, since you're not having teams practice. So is that something we can expand?
Yeah, kids can go out for whatever
Yeah.
activity they choose.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if they choose to join whatever team, there's that ability always to do that. That's why we do our fairs and our co-curricular activities in the fall. There's always opportunities for what kids want to do. That's what we're here for.
good. Okay.
But I mean, I think what Brian, you and I talked about was kind of trying to frame up tonight what the issues were. But one of the pieces that kind of directly impacts kind of this discussion is also around the decision that we're looking to make on next Monday, which is on how we start to deliver that instruction. And then this being a piece, then once that's determined, either the committee comes back together or we have another board meeting that's specifically focused on, I think, doing exactly what you said, Dave, and you walk through and you make it crystal clear. Kind of given that position and given that scenario, what does this all look like and what are we okay with and what are we not?
So you're saying tonight we're not going to do that?
We've talked about that. I guess that's a conversation for the committee, is trying to decide kind of what the future of all of these are. Some of it, even the idea of like the intramurals of the practice of the skill development, it's hard to know if we're going to be able to do or commit to do until we know what our instructional model is. Yeah, obviously, if we're in person, that's where we land. Then that is certainly absolutely an option. If the conversation leads to any of the virtual type things, then that's a conversation as far as how do you maintain something on an in-person co-curricular level when the academic pieces aren't. So I think that there's a piece of, does this conversation follow that dialogue that's happening on Monday? So I think that's part of the discussion here tonight, is I want to make sure we have a plan for our timing for these decisions. If there's things that we are prepared to kind of take a position on tonight, I think that's always absolutely viable to do. But I think the bigger piece that I think are wondering what's happening with all of these things in the fall may need to follow our decision, our final decision and model we have. That was kind of what Brian, you and I talked about earlier today. So, but if there are pieces you feel strongly that, regardless of where we land, these are important pieces. I mean, such as the travel piece, Dave. I mean, if that's as long as you're within, I don't foresee us moving from phase 2 to phase 3 anytime soon. That's not going to be in the next few weeks. It's probably not going to be when we start school, and it's probably not going to be early into the fall. That's just my take based on conversations with public health. So they're not anticipating changing any of the sports guidelines between now and September 1. I've heard that point blank.
Yeah, I think tonight's just kind of informing the things that we're looking at, and then once you guys have decided on what school's going to look like, I think then that'll give us a lot of guidance on what our activities look like. There is one point I would like, and I don't know if Randy, you're ready to bring this up, but we do have outside groups that use our facilities. Whether that's the Wave, the Lions Club, we have a whole host of groups that rent out our facilities, and they've been asking, because they normally have things that come up in the school year that they host at our buildings. My responses to them have been, at this point, we are not reserving spaces for groups, non-school groups. I guess that's a conversation though I think we need to begin, at least start to have. I don't know if decisions need to be made today, but it's definitely something that's going to become more and more, because now is about the time people start contacting me for the school year, for their events.
My perspective is right now we should not allow any outside groups in. I mean, when I'm looking at just trying to manage the ones that we have and the vetting of their plans for reentry from camp kindergarten to the weightlifting program, we're looking to start, band camp is in 2 weeks, where it's as specific as playing is outside in an outside venue because of the issues inside with aerosoling, and then how do you mitigate all of that, the cleaning, the navigation of it. we don't have capacity to be vetting all of those out with outside groups. So to me, it's a focus in on, for at least right now, what we have in front of us, our programs, and I realize there's a benefit to our kids of many of these outside things. I just don't think that, to your point that you mentioned earlier, just about travel, just trying to make sure we do it well. We're trying to do it with the programs we have, as opposed to trying to do it with outside groups. And I realize that impacts our club swim, and it impacts some of those. But at a point in the future, if there's an opportunity to where we're at a capacity to consider that, happy to bring that conversation back. But I think for right now, that's a piece I think we could take a stand on.
Discussion
Well, I think part of this is no matter which sports we allow to go forward or not, depending on the situation and where we are. I think we should set a co-curricular meeting to literally go through them all after Monday. We should, as part of that, we should set an overall transportation policy. So that every sport is clear that if they're going to try to go somewhere else, we should probably set a temporary policy on rental space, just because it should be clear, and it should be you getting told by the way, why are you doing this to me? It should be the board policy. And I just don't, I agree with you, Randy. I don't see how we let any other group in.
Right.
It's sad. I hate doing that. You know, maybe if it's an outdoor thing, you know, where it's just on one of our fields, maybe. Although I think we should tell them, you're going to have to live by the same rules we have.
That's right.
If you can't live by that rule and come here and do that, one, we wouldn't rent to you again under the current situation.
That was going to be my question: is who's responsible for making? We're going to put the onus on them to make sure those rules are followed, or am I going to have to be
Well,
out there?
they have to follow the rules, and if it's found out they didn't follow the rules one way or another, then it's an automatic. You can't use the space for the term of whatever this is.
Right now, when I look at the capacity of my team to be able to vet and manage that, it's not there.
So you won't even want to do outdoor spaces?
Not right
And
now.
that's fine.
Right now, I would just say no to all of it, because I think it's just, I mean, we can revisit it in a number of weeks until but right now, from a capacity standpoint, we're there. I don't have any more. And even as I see the ones coming through from our own programs that I know we have to vet out, that's pressing us.
Well, yeah, I saw the wave one, and then the bad thing is, and the one from the soccer coach, was that today? I read those, and what they're saying, well, we'll be able to gain more people because the other sports aren't doing anything. It's like, you just gave me the whole reason to say no. You want to push your numbers up, and I get that, but you just went against everything we're trying to do.
And the pool, if you guys had a chance to look at those documents, you know, the pool has its own unique set of rules regarding the reopening plans and best practices from WCSD, to the point where, you know, we basically, the rule is 50% pool capacity, but if you ever been in our pool or seen it, technically our pool capacity is 250 people. You cannot have, but you still have to maintain 6 feet of social distance, so there's no way we can have 50%. We can't, right now the way the rules are written, we can't even have 2 swimmers in a lane because they'll cross over next to each other. And I just look at when we start swim practice for ourselves, we typically have about 30 girls swimming. I mean, we're going to be eating up chunks of time because we're going to have to do it in shifts, where Coach Frank is there with the varsity for an hour and a half or so, and then Coach Walter is there with the JV, the other half of the kids. And they literally will have 8 girls in the pool, 8 girls standing on the deck, and then they'll trade off. So it's, to open it up to other groups is going to be challenging.
I agree with both. I just don't think we can do it. We have to look out for our kids first in the school district and as the school sponsored program. And we have to keep things clean for them and if we ever get back there. So do you want just an agreement that that's what we're gonna do?
I'm fine with that if you, I mean, I like what Dave is saying. I mean, for right now, that's what Aaron's been doing right now. So I think we can stay with that. I like your idea, Dave, that once we get through Monday, we kind of have another meeting where we kind of nail out these procedures or policy pieces. If you want to vote on that tonight, that we're just going to continue to maintain our practice, I'm happy to have that as part of the motion from the committee.
I
That would
make a
just keep our
motion that
practice.
we currently do not rent out any space to any outside group. And what would be the other thing? That all of our sports follow Dane County's medical guidance, no matter where they're located. I think that's what we're doing right now, right?
Right. So your motion basically would tell us that we are following the guidelines of public health. We're not going to rent out our facilities, and your motion would also say we're not going to allow travel to a place that has lesser standards than what makes
Lesser standards than what our district is currently on.
Right.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Would you like that to come to the meeting on Monday?
Yeah.
So that we'll take that piece to the meeting on Monday as part of our discussion too, as a report out of here. That's kind of how I'd have that orchestrated.
Do you want to pick a date for that next meeting already, since we're all here?
So the question I guess I would ask is, do you, and this is what Brian, you and I have talked about,
Yeah.
do we want to do that as a committee? Or do you want to do that, we can just set a special board meeting and address it all together as a whole board? It's another full board meeting. Otherwise, we kick it, then the decision on any of the things we would do as a committee level would not go to the board till the
Until
August 10th.
That's pretty late considering most of our sports.
Right,
Jacket's going to be thrilled if we have another board meeting.
Yeah.
right. But I just-
Okay, that's a good number, we should do it.
But do we do another board meeting?
I'm really
like-
smiling under the mask.
Yeah, like August 3rd, do we do a minute that just deals with this?
Can I ask a quick question just so I know?
Yes.
So if public health, and just as a hypothetical, as I'm just trying to work through this and I'll get questions. Public health comes out tomorrow with phase 3 and says, these are our gathering sizes, we can now, soccer's allowed to compete, have competitions. That means then we're free then to go to Beaver Dam and have a soccer match. Is that
That's
what that
correct.
motion
That's what
says?
Correct. So the motion would
Oh,
say,
so, I'm sorry, I was looking at my calendar. So you're saying if Beaver Dam had the same rules we had,
What I'm saying is if public health comes out tomorrow with phase 3 and it now matches or is more lenient than what Beaver Dam, I think they're in Dodge County or whatever, their rules, are we then able to go to Beaver Dam and compete?
that's what Dave's
what
motion would say.
no,
because otherwise what we're saying basically is we're not competing anymore.
Because what I heard your motion being is, right now, golf is able to compete in Dane County.
So right now
So
we're
if
basically
they-
saying
if there
nothing
was a
else.
golf match in Sauk Prairie, in Sauk County, Columbia County, then we could send our team there.
if in Sauk County, if they had the same rules as Dane County.
So,
Yes.
meaning they're allowing golf.
They're allowing golf, but if Sauk County said no mask, no social distancing, then you wouldn't,
Okay, so what,
Right.
right?
that motion then, we are basically canceling all competitions. Because we have the strictest rules.
Yeah, so your motion would restrict any travel outside of Dane County. And since there's no competition from any of the sports except for those few that you mentioned, you could only play within Dane County: golf, cross country, singles tennis, and singles swimming. So that-
I mean, that sounds horrible, I hate that, but how do we sit there and rationalize that we have to do this in Dane
Right.
County because we're protecting our kids and we're protecting the education component? And then say, but we're gonna send some of the kids somewhere and they're gonna do something less and possibly bring it back into the class, any
Yeah.
possible classrooms we have.
Does any of this hang on the idea that if we go to totally virtual or not on Monday when we decide that? Is it?
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean.
I would say if you go totally virtual, you're probably not.
You shut down all your
entertaining
sports
anyone.
anyway.
Yeah.
So the other piece, Dave, is, and I'm just trying to clarify your motion, because your motion, as approved by the committee here, would almost kind of negate the need for another meeting.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't need to go through every sport, because it would basically be the ones that are allowed, which Aaron has said.
And we would,
It'd
the
be
only thing
pretty
we'd be
clear.
allowed to do basically for almost everything, because what the big 8 schools, which are in Dane County that we compete against, have already shut down everything.
Right.
So
They shut down even tennis and golf and everything.
they've canceled all their conference schedules.
Okay.
Well, I think we went from talking about renting space to
Yeah.
our students, which I'd like to keep that two separate.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is anything we do here still has to be approved by the full board. This is only a recommendation. The committee can't set the policy.
Yeah, but I would still like to keep that, you know.
Okay.
We don't rent, we
So-
motion that we don't rent to any outside groups without board approval, or that's not.
We don't want board approval, we don't want to even ask.
Okay, I was on the women's side of the motion, so I'll
We
make a
don't
motion
want
to
the board to
reconsider.
approve it, we want the, to be a policy that they don't get to at all.
Well,
We
what
don't want
if things change in the second quarter of the school year, and that's what I'm saying, until.
But
things
that's
change.
just it though. We kind of said that at the board meeting, is that if things change, and I've talked with Randy about this, is taking all these policies we're doing specifically around COVID and compartmentalizing them, so the minute things change, we go and look back at all of them. Like, for example, I don't think any of us would agree that if the federal lawsuit knocks out the mask requirement in Dane County, we're gonna automatically let the mask requirement in the school district go. Personally, I would think we would try to maintain it. So when you sit there and say, well, Dane County's rules suddenly changed, and then we just automatically do all these things. I'm not willing to give that carte blanche, because I'm afraid the courts are gonna come in and throw every single rule out. And if they do, we may not wanna do that. And the court in Wisconsin so far has left the school districts alone. They have not gone to the school districts and said, you can't do this, but they've done it to everybody else. So if,
It's because the schools haven't had school yet to have the rules actually.
I'm concerned that a lawsuit is gonna change the rules, and I don't want our policies to automatically change just because of the result of the lawsuit. If we have the ability to have a safe environment,
Right.
we should maintain it.
Right,
So that's why I'm a little concerned when you were saying about but if Dane County wants to go, then we can go do everything, right?
Right. Well, that's why I asked,
That's
because
what I wanted to
that's
clarify.
gonna be the first question.
That's how I interpreted your motion too.
Yeah.
So I think if we kind of go back, and to your point, Brian, if we look at just outside groups, so I think we're in agreement that outside groups we're not going to allow in it right now. So I think entertaining a motion that could go to the board on Monday, that we're not at this point allowing outside groups in. That was our first piece.
right.
And do we want a time limit on that or not? Do we want a span?
I think it can be revisited.
That's why I think this whole thing of compartmentalizing all these COVID things, the minute we go to phase 3, or the minute the lawsuit comes
Right.
through, all of these things will automatically be scanned again, just to see,
Right.
do we want to move anything, or do we have to move anything?
I think right now, when I look at the outside groups, the reason I'm saying no to them, I don't have capacity to manage them. Zero. So I think that's a number one piece. Two, I think it's a piece of then trying, once we get past a few things where we may have some capacity, but then I think we have to vet and see, is this what we want to do or not? But just seeing the complexities of what we're going through just to do the events we're doing now is significant with our other workload. So to me, I would just say it could be revisited here at our board meeting to see if we want to change it. I mean, and I'm talking August board meeting, we can do that. But that
Is
way
there
at
anything
least-
that we could say we're recommending for this school year not to do it? And then if we want to change it, we can come back, as opposed to the other way around? Do you want to make it a stronger?
I don't want to state it that long, I don't think that's necessary. I think right now, I just want Aaron to basically have some backing to say no to the groups that are going to be pressing to use our space, and to say right now that we're not going to do that. I mean, if that's a piece, is there anything, Aaron, between now and September 1st that gives you pause to say that we have to say that in your mind, we need to be more open to?
Regarding outside groups,
The only outside groups I would want flexibility with, the board already kind of gave it to us at our last board meeting, was Wisconsin Youth Company. That was daycare stuff. But I think what we're talking about are some of the other things outside of that.
nothing comes, no, not in the next month.
So even if we said between now and our September board meeting, we're not letting groups in, that at least gives you a time frame, and then we can revisit.
Yeah, because I've had, and I just to be clear, when we say outside groups, I include Village Rec in that, and the village in that as an outside group. I don't
Yeah.
consider them to be a school group, even though in our policy they're given preference,
Right.
but they're not a school group. And so I've been pretty clear with Jeff Skog on that.
Has there been something from the village?
No, Jeff has
There's
just been
summer-
asking.
There's summer programs.
They have summer programs that we've canceled, but Jeff's just been asking about scheduling out what they do. And they do some volleyball stuff, programming. They do some youth basketball programming. We've typically by now already had that all scheduled out and mapped out with Jeff.
But I think we're already pretty clear volleyball and basketball are dead in the water anyway.
For the most part.
Until Dane County moves. to
Well, I
phase
mean,
three.
for Village Rec, it's just practicing. They're not competing. It's not a.
So you can
a
do
competition.
skill development, you can
Yeah.
do practices, you just can't do the competitive games.
Yeah.
So I think if right now, if you're looking at like a time frame, Judy, I would say September 1st, the September board meeting. That gives us at least a time, and then we can revisit it and see where we're at. But I think from our perspective, that would give Aaron, I think, what you need to be able to say no, and continue to say no, given everything else we're doing. It mitigates all of our other.
Well, and it also gives them at least an idea of when it will be
Right.
revisited.
So basically, you're concerned about the original motion, the problem of kids' transport going somewhere else.
The way I interpreted your first motion was exactly how Aaron did, was that your motion stated that we wouldn't allow any teams to travel outside of our county unless they were adhering to the Madison-Dane County guidelines.
Right.
So I'm going to use the example of golf. So golf would be able to compete in Waunakee, and in Sauk County, they can play golf. So is golf allowed to travel? And when you look at soccer, there's different rules. So in essence, you've already made the decision that we aren't playing in Dane County and we're not playing in Sauk County.
For
And I
soccer.
think part of what I heard us talk about earlier was wanting to have a meeting where we could go through each one of them and be very clear about it. I think your motion kind of,
Well, then I'll make a
Make-
motion to reconsider, since I was on the winning side of the motion. We can then vote that motion down, go back and do a separate motion for
right,
each one.
and then what we'll do is we'll bring up, once the decision and instructional pieces are made, then we bring back either the co-curricular committee or the full board to go through each one of these and make a final decision on what those things look like.
Okay, so a motion to reconsider, which is if we pass that motion, then the motion's wiped out. Then we can go back and make the one just about the
Just about the
Outside.
outside groups up through the September
All
board
right, so
meeting.
you making a motion to strike your own motion?
Yes.
Second, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all approved?
Aye.
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 All right.
Robert's
Rebecca,
rules
did
is
you,
fine.
did you follow that, Rebecca? All right, super, thank you.
Okay, so I make a motion that we not rent to any groups outside the school district. It's actually a recommendation to the full board that we do not rent to any facilities to any group outside of the school district.
Right.
Until the September, revisit at the September board meeting.
Revisit at the September meeting. The only caveat, I would say, we've already approved my conversations with like Wisconsin Youth Company for some data.
All right, take it a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, very good.
So then, now, you are saying we do need another meeting, but you want it to be the full board.
That's a question I have. It can either be the committee and then we take it to the full board at the August meeting. I think that gets a little late.
August 11th.
Yeah, so.
So you want to do it August 3rd?
Yeah, so do we do something on, we either have then a committee meeting file next week, and then we vet that out, and then we have a special meeting on the 3rd.
Why not just have it all at the August 3rd meeting?
Right.
They're all going to have the same
Let's
questions.
have a recommendation to the board on next month, this coming Monday, that we have a special meeting on the 3rd just to deal with this item.
A special board meeting on the 3rd.
That's what I would think we're,
That
Then-
makes 3 in August?
it makes a lot in our, yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
I make a recommendation that the full board have a co-curricular, a special board meeting on co-curricular approvals August 3rd.
Yep.
Second.
All approval? Aye.
Aye.
Just a few things that are,
Hopefully not.
So we have to get permission to have a third board meeting then, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that on Monday. We'll just
Okay.
make sure we have enough. That way we can, and what I anticipate us doing is we could utilize actually this, probably this similar document and walk through each one of the activities and really have a conversation about where we're at. Does that make sense to you, Aaron?
Yes.
And that would give us direction going into August.
Can it be streamlined? We don't want a discussion about every single sport and activity, do we?
I think what we're looking at is probably looking at what every sport was and then how it lines up with the Dane County plan.
What I would like to suggest is that in the agenda, your memo was decent, great. The problem is the public can't see it during the meeting or before the meeting.
Sure.
So
They
I would
should be able
suggest,
to.
what?
They should be able to.
Is the link in there?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just wondering if on the agenda, we just do, you know, the item of co-curricular things and then just put each one right directly in the agenda.
Sure.
Sort of like we do on full board meetings, where we'll have an item and then we'll have a paragraph there talking about it.
Sure. So like
Just
literally
as a way,
cut and paste it into the
Yeah.
agenda, okay.
so that each one is, you know, A, B, C, D, E. The public will see it as easy as possible and they can decide, seeing the comments, if they want to jump or not.
I think if you didn't.
We only have 11 people watching this right now.
If you didn't have
Right.
So do we want to cover
Oh,
some of the
Let every
basic?
sport listed, but
Yeah.
I don't, do we need a discussion about it? I'm worried about an in-depth discussion on every sport and activity.
I don't think that'll happen. I think there will be some, but if, with his analysis on it, most,
Okay,
I don't think we'd go fairly.
What I would look at is we would do a quick overview of what the rules are in our county. We could recap some of the conversation here, and then we can go by each one of the sports and outline exactly what it looks like.
And then
By
sort of
doing
like the consent agenda, if somebody
Yeah.
wants to pull one out,
Right.
pull it out, we'll talk about it.
Right.
Otherwise, we approve.
Yep.
So
And
we can
that'll,
look at it
that'll
ahead
come
of
at a
time.
point after we've had our meeting on Monday. It'll give us some clarity as far as where we're at.
And I think if we let all the board know on the 27th that this is what's coming,
Yeah.
They will
this
be
is how we're gonna
prepared.
run it, it should be fine.
A few other things just to kind of, I'm not going to go in depth into them, but I know that you've mentioned them in here. If we do get to a point of like hosting events here, concessions run under a whole different set of regulations under the restaurant industry.
yeah.
Things like busing, you've already mentioned, I think that's a piece that we would kind of have as part of this as well. Admissions, I mean, obviously we're looking at, it's all going to be contingent if we host any events and how we do that. Then you have these sizes, we'll bring something forward if there's a desire for us to host events, how we do that. It may not even be worth trying to do some of the collection of gate receipts if you're going to allow the parents in.
Yeah,
And
it's,
that's probably not
that
even going to be bigger than that.
conversation I had with Steve Summers was, you know, looking at some of these size limits, if we can't have certain normal crowd sizes, we're gonna pay more in our ticket takers than we're actually gonna take in funds.
So there's, yeah. So
We're gonna have to
that's-
also consider a lot of our co-curricular activities make their money off that concessions. And if they don't have that money,
Yeah.
what are their shortfalls that they're looking at? And
You
what
look-
can we do about that?
For just as for your consideration too with the concessions, an average football night at concessions, an average football night at concession, a student group makes about $1,000.
Right.
So in one night, 2.5, 3 hours, they make $1,000. It's, you know, for the FFA or for some of those other groups, drama club, it's it's a big fundraiser for them.
Yeah.
And it's
I think we
very
need-
likely not going to happen.
I think we need to seriously look at, I mean, some of those groups are still gonna be able to function, even under the COVID, they'll figure, like,
Yeah.
one act.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you'll probably know a lot more than I do, Brian, about whether that amount of money is gonna affect their ability to have a regular year, or probably a more expensive year than regular, just because of all the restrictions.
Right.
It'd be really sad to have those groups have a problem when we can't hardly let anybody else do it.
A lot of that money they raise goes to travel or other activities that they want to do. Kind of based on the discussion tonight, if they're not traveling or doing some of those
They're not gonna have
activities.
FFA going to the national convention.
Right,
They're
yeah.
not
And that's a
gonna be
big
doing
expense
some
for
of those
them, and
things.
then they subsidize it for kids and get as many as they can get there, so.
And that's
that was-
another-
That was my question is, you know, or do they, is this doesn't fund their whole activity, this is just those special events that they want to do up at the
Usually,
beyond.
yeah.
I mean, I think we're gonna have to have, your letter covered a lot of the athletic stuff.
Yep.
We're gonna have to have one for all the other co-curriculars too.
Yep.
And deal with them, we might as well deal with them at the same time
Yep.
right now.
Some of them have a little different timing, some are similar, some have other options, which athletics doesn't. I mean, like the one act being able to go virtual, some of our other sports don't. So I think that'll be a conversation we can kind of look at with some of our advisors. Before we adjourn, I just want to bring up one other thing, and this is part of that decision that we get to at that meeting in early August is then, and dependent on if we're, kind of to what degree we have activities is also then related to like coaches pay, all of those pieces. So we need to revisit that. That's a piece that I know that Aaron and Brian Grabarski and I have had some very high-level discussions on. Certainly if there was an opportunity where we did some of this continued work throughout the season, even if you're not competing, I mean, to me, that's still within the line of the coach's salary pieces, but if for any reason things get completely canceled or we do something else, then there's some other pieces we want to have some conversations to see what the board's position is on some of these compensatory issues with coaches and advisors.
Yeah, I guess the one question I had from the notes too would be, you know, these assistant coaches, volunteer coaches in the current plan wouldn't be enough to actually even run some of these teams in a practice. I'm
Yeah.
assuming some of these, the head coaches are probably some type of certification in terms of CPR, first aid, but some of these auxiliary coaches probably are not.
So all paid coaches are required to be CPR, AED, and first aid trained. Volunteer coaches, we offer the training to them for free. The vast majority of them do it, but it's not required. Our volunteer coach policy, or the policy that covers volunteer coaches, specifically prevents volunteer coaches being alone with students. So even though like cross country, she has like 4 or 5 volunteer coaches, we can't use them to break her group up into smaller subgroups and take, because they can't be alone with that group of kids. So it's nice to have those guys and gals running with our athletes, but we can't fully leverage them to actually have smaller group sizes because they can't technically be alone with their student athletes. So that does, you know, the one that that just strikes me is just because of the number of users, whether it's open swim, lap swim, is the pool. I mean, to get 36 girls through that pool with 2 coaches is going to take time. And
Thanks for clarifying that.
I think that's all we had tonight, Aaron. Is there anything else in there that you wanted to highlight? Otherwise, I think we've got kind of the info we wanted to present and then have a plan for any timeline for how we're going to move it forward.
yeah, no, I mean, I just want to highlight that, you know, we do have some plans, whether it's, you know, the not taking admission, but we have some other plans too. if we're not able to have crowds, of ways of streaming. I've had conversations with Ann Blackburn and Jason McConnell about broadcasting those games. I've had meetings, and just because I want you guys to know that these conversations have been happening in case someone comes to you. I also polled parent reps from each of our sports, fall sports, about, okay, if we're able to have, would you be okay with the streaming situation? If we had limited tickets, how would you feel about a situation where maybe each player only has 2 tickets and they can give them to mom and dad, or whatever that, and again, all this stuff very preliminary, just trying to see how the parents were feeling about these different things. So those conversations have been going on, trying to think creatively regarding, okay, if we're going to have events but we can't have fans, how can we allow parents to still watch these games or come to these games? One of the things that I had a parent, what I thought was going to be very much, they should be, I just based on conversations I had with other topics, thought he was going to be very much like, kids should be in school all day, every day, and we should be playing sports like regular, there shouldn't be any restrictions. But he was like, Aaron, if that means I have to watch all my kids' games the next day on Huddle for him to play, that's what we'll do. So parents are very much like, they want to make sure that we're, keeping an eye on the ball of getting these kids to do things, and they're going to be very flexible. Brian and I went out very quickly to see about the bleachers and what 6 feet of social distancing would look like in the student section. What we did the math, it was 25 students in the student section. And you can imagine how hotly contested.
Which 25 gave?
Yeah, exactly. And that was, it'd be, that would definitely pose some challenge.
You didn't consider the normal student seating of along the fence line, where they all hang out anyway?
Well, and there's going to be, if it's football, we always have the people up on the practice field, or, soccer. We have the soccer for the lower levels where kids can just walk up and in, and, those are things that we're thinking about, and how do we address those situations and manage those situations. Those are just things that we understand they're coming up, and we're just working through every different brainstorm and every different way to address them.
Do you think there would be time to survey the coaches to see how many of them would be interested even in doing these more skill development type things if their sport can't go forward? I'm wondering if some of them would say.
I could put together that survey and get it out very quickly, by the end of the week.
I just think it'd be good to know if we say that that's all your sport can do. Do they want to participate in that, or would they see that as?
I think you can get that out to them, and that
Yeah,
could be for the
I could have that done and out probably even by the end of the day tomorrow.
Yep.
Just not looking at totally at my schedule.
Yep.
I think I'd have time in that day to do that tomorrow and get that out.
Would there be any value in calculating, like you were saying, having enough assistant coaches? Do we need more if we go to that type of a model? Which sports would need them, and how many more would we need?
Yeah, we can assess that.
That's the sort of thing we'll need if we're going to make a decision about.
You're doing skill development, though, you could split those groups up more by the coach as opposed to trying to keep everybody together and then also keep them isolated. So it provide you with a lot more flexibility. You're not preparing, if you're not preparing for games and you're not trying to develop the best 12 players or something, depending on the sport, you can split those groups and then a couple nights a week.
But if you had 100 kids and your group could not be, say, larger than 10, you need 10 coaches. Because you can't have the coaches moving between the groups.
And that's definitely, that's a legitimate concern. Right now, I'll give you and this is a good thing. I want to say this right now because it's public, is the number one asset that Waunakee has in its activities and its athletics is our participation rate, the number of kids we get out. Volleyball had 50 freshman girls sign up when she had her virtual or online interest meeting. Plus the other almost 20 sophomores, 20 juniors, and a handful of the seniors. So we're looking at almost
100
kids just in volleyball. And right now we have 2 freshman volleyball coaches. and they can each only do 10 at a time. I mean, that's 5, like you were saying, Dave, that's 5 sessions, you know, between the two.
You won't be able to do it.
I mean, you don't have enough time in your day with your day job, no one does, you know, regardless of if they're a teacher here or they're somewhere else to be able to handle that. And then, I mean, yes, I would love to be able to hire a bunch more coaches, but I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, I don't know what budgets are going to look like in 2021.
But there's the crazy thing. If it really gets shut down and we're not doing the transportation side, which is almost the most expensive part,
Yeah.
you would have money for more coaches.
It's a good question. Let's find out from the survey kind of and then we can do an analysis of that for the meeting.
So, do you want me, just so I can be clear, all head coaches and assistant coaches for all seasons, or are we just looking at the fall?
I would just do fall.
I think you just do the fall head coaches right now.
Okay.
And you get those.
Your interest in, if we're not able to compete, holding an intramural or skill development season in the fall sports if we're unable to compete due to Dane County health.
However you phrase it, keeping active with the kids, keeping activities
I
going.
think
Depending on the model we choose.
I think it's got to be clear that there's very much the possibility that there would be no actual games played.
I will type it up and I'll run it by you before I send it out to make sure it's reading how you guys want it to.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot depends on the educational model for next
Yep.
Monday. But that doesn't necessarily dictate full seasons or anything like that. We still have to follow the guidelines of high risk, moderate risk, and how we're going to handle the low risk sports. So it's not quite cut and dry yet.
No, unfortunately not.
So, all right, any other discussion? All right,
Motion to adjourn.
yeah,
Second?
all right, all in
Awesome.
favor?
Aye.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Thank you all.
We had a high of 11 people.
All right.